Hey guys, Coach Joel here. I've got a really interesting hand of the day for you today. Came from one of our elite members, John, and I've reviewed it a few times, and it's a hand where I really don't think that John made any real mistakes, and yet the outcome was quite difficult. And we'll dive in and we'll see if there's anything he could have done differently, and then ultimately we're going to ask what should John be doing after a hand like this occurs. So let's get started. All right, so it's a 1-2 game, and John is on the button. Here we go. Here comes the pre-flop cards, and we are dealt jacks. Great situation. It's going to fold around, and villain 1, fairly short stacked right now. It's going to open to 7, and we're going to make it 30. So I think this is actually a little bit on the big side, but I think it's just fine. Normally in position, I tend to 3-bet a little bit smaller, maybe 3x or so. 3x will still get the job done here, where it's going to create a really good SPR to play against villain 1. It's going to be really easy to be able to maneuver post flop if you have an overpair, or if you flop a set. And we're going for value here. 30 is fine as well. A little on the bigger side. It's gonna hopefully isolate villain 1 and just create very easy decisions for us. If he jams over the top, we're gonna have an easy pre-flop call. If he calls, then likely we're going with our hand, because the stack to pot ratio is going to be roughly 1. And unless like 2 overcards come on the flop, we're likely going with this hand against villain 1, and potentially playing for his short stack. So after we 3-bet, there's a little wrinkle in this hand. We get cold called by villain 2 in the small blind. So this is one of the more interesting moments in the hand, and we know a little bit about villain 2. We know that this is a loose, aggressive player who we caught bluffing on a previous orbit. So we know that he may be on the looser side here. Just because he's on the looser side doesn't mean he's not a good player and doesn't kind of recognize the situation here. So villain 2 should not be cold calling with many hands here at all, because the problem is, if he cold calls, there's a very real chance that villain 1 jams all in. I mean, he has very little left. He may see villain 2's cold call as potential dead money. And if villain 1 jams all in, there's a chance that we isolate over the top. And then villain 2 just loses $30 and he doesn't even get to see a flop. The other thing is, villain 2 is going to be playing, even if villain 1 just calls and villain 2 does get to see the flop, villain 2 is going to be playing out of position, without the initiative, at a range disadvantage, in a 3-bet pot. And there's a very good chance that he's going to have to check fold here. So it's not really a play that I'd recommend making with too many hands. Once in a while, it could be a nice surprise tactic to do this with a hand like aces or kings, if you think that villain 1 is likely to jam, and then the hero is likely to isolate, then you wind up winning a huge pre-flop pot. But he's a good player. Villain 2 really shouldn't have that many hands here. I mean, I'd be giving him something like, tens or better, ace king and ace queen suited, and kings and aces are gonna cold 4-bet quite often here too. So I wouldn't be giving him all of those combos, but maybe some as a trap. But if he's a looser player, then maybe he does have about 10% of hands here. Maybe he's got 7s or better. He's got the best suited Broadway hands, and ace king, ace queen, and maybe even ace jack offsuit if he's quite loose. So anyways, he cold calls, and we villain 1 completes, and we go to the flop, and we have bottom set, and villain 1 decides to jam all in for 80, and here we have very obvious call. Yeah, I mean, we're never folding a set for less than a pot size bet here. There's just too many hands that villain 1 could have. He could, he's short stacked. He really could be going with any ace right now. and there's tons of 2 pairs that we beat as well. So really not too much to think about here. The point in the hand where we do need to think is when villain 2 jams all in for 520. So this is a moment to just slow down and pause. The first thing that we need to recognize is that the jam isn't actually for 520 because we don't have 520. So he is actually betting 310, and because that's the amount that we have. And it's 230 more for us to call. So villain 2 just bet 310. The 80s from us and villain 1 also went into the pot on the flop. So that's 470 plus the original 92. So there's 562 in the pot, and it's 230 more for us to call. So we have to calculate our pot odds. We're getting roughly 2.5 to 1. So, like we need basically, 30% or so equity here. So we can never fold in this spot. The reason is villain 2 has a lot of 2-pair combos that we beat. And even if he has a straight, which is the hand that we're worried about, if he cold called with king 10 suited and has a straight, we're getting the right price to draw. So right now our full house has 10 outs, has 1 jack, 3 queens, 3 aces, and then whatever appears on the turn is going to give us an additional 3 outs to be able to hit on the river. The set has a 35% chance to improve by the river to a full house. And so we'd only be needing to get 2 to 1 on our call from the pot, but we're actually getting 2.5 to 1. So clearly we have the right odds to draw for a full house, even if he had flopped the nuts straight. The only time that we're really crushed here and we don't have the right odds to draw is if he has aces or queens. In that case, we're only drawing to 1 out, the last remaining jack. But there are only 6 combinations of that. And also, wouldn't villain 2 have sometimes 4-bet aces and queens? He's not always going to trap with those hands. So at most, I think we're dominated by 2 or 3 combos here where we're not getting the right price. However, villain 2 can also have ace queen. An ace queen is 9 combos. There's 3 combos of aces and 3 combos of queens, multiply them together, 9 different combos that we are crushing. Again, maybe he doesn't have all 9. Maybe sometimes he re-raises, sometimes he folds in the spot. I don't know, but he certainly has more combinations of hands that we dominate compared to the ones that are dominating us. And then when you factor in the fact that he may, this may not be a good player. Maybe he's overplaying ace king potentially, or maybe he's a very loose player that did have ace jack offsuit, or maybe he had queen jack suited somehow. Actually, we're blocking queen jack suited, so he can't have queen jack suited, but he could have 3 combinations of ace jack off that he decides to cold call with pre-flop. So I just think that there are too many combinations that we are beating when you factor in ace queen, a potential overplay with ace king, a loose call with ace jack off, and the fact that we're getting the right odds to draw against a straight. We can never fold here. So totally recommend calling. We do call, we get the bad news. Villain 1 had ace queen off, and villain 2 made a very loose pre-flop call with king 10 off, and he ultimately wins the pot and gets rewarded. So a few things that we should be noting about both villains here. Let's start with villain 1. I actually don't like pre-flop flat from villain 1. Villain 1 should probably just be jamming all in pre-flop if he's going to play this hand. There's a really good chance that villain 2, may fold, and then there's additional dead money in the event that he's called. We may fold as well. So it's a great spot for villain 1, given his stack size, to just jam all in. He has a hand that really wants to see 5 cards to be able to develop and kind of equalize against pairs. on with a hand like ace queen off when you're out of position without the initiative is, if you miss the flop, you have to do a little bit more check folding, especially if you're out of position and there are two other players in the hand. So villain one's going to have to check fold a little bit too often here. He really should just be getting in his money and realizing his full equity over 5 cards. Anyways, didn't work out for him. He did flop very well, but ultimately doesn't work out. And then villain two, his pre-flop call is just way too loose. So we should be noting that this is a player that we're going to want to be playing against in the future. He cold calls and he basically just throws caution to the wind that, like so much could have gone wrong for him. Villain one could have re-raised all in. We could have isolated and he loses his $30. Even worse, if both of us called and the flop comes, he doesn't know that we don't have ace king. If the flop had come, king high and we have ace king, he has what's called reverse implied odds now. He hit his hand and yet he stands to lose a big pot with a hand like king 10 off because he's out of position, he has top pair, and he doesn't really know if we're bluffing or if we're value betting him. He's just in a horrible spot. And, basically he is just bailed out by the deck. He gets lucky and he gets to stack 2 players because of it. So ultimately, John, I don't think there's anything you could have done differently here. And so this hand is less about strategy and it's more about what do we do when a hand like this occurs? And so, our first tendency is to look back and really make sure that there's, we couldn't have done anything differently. There's no street where we could have played better. My suggestion of sizing a little bit smaller pre-flop to make, give our range a higher chance of getting called when we're in position, and because we're going to be 3-betting more often in position, like that suggestion is not ultimately going to change the result here. Villain two, if anything, would have called for that smaller amount. So there's really not too much we could have done on the flop. Obviously, we're calling. And like I said, we're just beating too many things to fold. So the real question is, what do you do with this result? And I think it's important to always be working on your mental game in poker. That could mean a lot of different things away from the table. It could mean, making sure you've exercised before your session. It could mean, making sure you have a meditation practice, or you're just like able to kind of calm down after a hand like this, take some deep breaths and make sure that you're not affected the next hand, because ultimately we just lost $340 through no fault of our own. That's poker. And it's, just imperative that, there's nothing you could have done about this hand, but what happens to so many players is they compound this hand into the next hand. They carry it with them, and then they make a mistake that actually was in their control. So the ultimate lesson here is just simply not to do that, to, take a deep breath, maybe go for a walk, and just say a simple mantra to yourself, like, no matter what happened in this hand, I'm going to play the next hand to the best of my abilities and resist the urge to go on tilt, resist the urge to berate villain two, who, you should be nice to this player. This is a player that, in the future is a player you want to be playing against. And the reason why poker is a profitable game is because of variance and because players like this can think that they made a good play in this hand. So hope you liked the video. Better luck next time, John. It's a tough one.